All right, so I've been busy with my Fusion 360 developing some stuff here because I've always had the question, like, cases like this is the half 2500 from Cooler Master. I remember I made that cool shroud that showed that the amount of airflow coming through the front of the chassis was more than sufficient to replace the CPU fans if you had a proper shroud that had a velocity stack built to it. I also started wondering, like, man, if you have huge fans like this pushing a ridiculous volume of air at a very ridiculous rate through the chassis, does it make it difficult for GPUs with axial fans like this that are faced down like this? Can the air that is pushing by actually be caught by these fans and brought up into the cooler? And will it have a dramatic effect on the cooling capability of the GPU? So not only to test that, did I have to design a shroud that would allow me to capture the air. It involved a few refinements of that design because I did an initial design that didn't work at all. And then I ended up with one that actually has some pretty promising results. So we'll take you through the journey today. We'll show you the results. And then I guess, this is perfect for all 17 of you that have a 5090 Tough.
So Jay likes boats.
USS Fletcher, torpedoes, and agility.
No. He really likes boats.
I'm the Bismarck, I shoot big guns. Oh no!
He really likes boats.
The IJN Yamato, the true fear in the Pacific.
And when he's not playing with his boats, he is building his boats.
Done.
And when he's not building those boats, he's playing with those boats. Online, in World of Warships.
If you've never tried it before, or it's been a while since you've played, now's actually a great time to jump into World of Warships. It's a free-to-play online naval battle game with over 850 historically inspired ships across 5 different classes, from nimble destroyers all the way up to massive battleships, aircraft carriers, and even submarines. They keep the game fresh with monthly updates and add new ships, events, cosmetics, and visual improvements like updated maps, water effects, lighting, and weather. You can play solo or squad up with friends in divisions, and if you use my link in the description and the invite code IMPACTFORCE, new players can unlock a bunch of free rewards to get started. And if you'd rather play on console, be sure to check out World of Warships Legends.
So yeah, he really likes boats.
Yeah.
All right, so this was the first design I sort of came up with for the idea of a shroud on here. You'll notice for this test, I took the CPU shroud thingy off. I just wanted it to be a more conventional type setup. That shroud works really well, but that's not the point of this video. It's about the GPU. So I came up with this design, which is very ugly and very crude. We learned don't do support material when printing on a curve, because then this ugliness happens, because it was actually printed in 2 different pieces, because it's too big for our printer bed. Both this way and that way. So I had to chop it in 2 and make a joint and put it together and glue it and all that. So that's why it's kind of ugly. But the idea was that if we had this sort of open scoop on the end and I mounted it to the GPU like this, then any of the air that is coming this way would sort of be captured by this scoop. It would have a sort of a, not really a velocity stack effect, but it would allow the GPU and the fan in the back to have a little extra velocity as it tapers down. Very similar to how a lot of intake manifolds are designed in a car. Usually the back runners get starved of air by the front, so you actually taper down the manifold so that the rear intakes valves actually have a higher velocity of air making their way back there to make up, so the front doesn't steal all of that air. It's actually, balancing is a really interesting concept when you look at airflow design in engines and such, and it applies here. So my idea was that we would just have the air come in here and then get scooped. The crazy part was, my thought was that I didn't need to flare out the design this way like a horn, because of the fact that the fans in here are also going to want to promote airflow. Whereas when we did our CPU cooler test, there was no fans on there at all, so it had to overcome that pressure differential. And the scoop allows the width or the mouth of it increases the velocity so that it can overcome the resistance on the back end, so it doesn't just turn into a big giant bubble and then bounce off. The air doesn't bounce off its own bubble, which we demonstrated with smoke before. But this concept didn't work too well. In fact, because I also didn't have a way to mount it, I just taped it down, and then the gaff tape did not like it, and then it just, during the test, it just went. So I was like, okay, that's just, you know what? Screw that. We'll go back to the drawing board and we'll come up with something that can actually attach to the face of the GPU. Now, just to recap once again, in case you kind of skipped the beginning, the idea here is that with this cooler, this GPU cooler sitting up in here like this, with these crazy front fans pushing air across it at a massive volume, over 200 CFM per fan, going at a crazy velocity, like the speed at which those fans move air is insane. If it was gonna be similar to like when you stick your head out the window of a moving car and try and breathe on the freeway and you realize like the air moving past your mouth is actually pulling air out of your body, I forget what that effect is called, but it makes it very difficult to breathe. You actually feel like you're suffocating and you can't, even if you're facing the air, like if you're facing forward. So I wondered if that potentially happens here with the GPUs. So after 3 or 4 attempts at, copying the front design, I was able to come up with this shroud, which actually utilizes the 4 screws that are in the corner of the GPU here on there. So what I'm gonna go ahead and sort of demonstrate was how this shroud attaches. And then knowing that I had the base figured out, then I could come up with the scoops or the headers or whatever you wanna call it, the intake runners. They're kind of like intake runners, I guess, on a car. The Tough became an accidental great GPU for this because of the fact that it has these 4 movable screws. These are actually the 4 screws that hold the fans to the shroud. Because I had initially taken the fan shroud off entirely with the heatsink just sitting on there and then actually mounted this over the heatsink, but the problem was that encapsulated the heatsink and then the air couldn't go anywhere out the sides. So I was like, okay, that's just a broken design. But this basically just mounts right on there, like very, very well, and then I can screw down the corners. The hardware even looked nice on there. Like, it just doesn't look bad. It looks like it was actually intended for it. But then I had to come up with the scoop designs. And the idea here is that the fan closest to the case fan is a lot less important than the middle fan and the fan closest to the IO port, because these 2 fans right here are directly over the hottest part of the heatsink, which is directly over the die, the VRMs on the front, as well as the memory. This is the pass-through fan right here, so it's a lot less crucial when it comes to the amount of cooling. So I came up with this design. So I designed this in Fusion 360. I'm really loving it, by the way, and I feel like the designs are getting a little bit more complicated, which is kind of fun, which makes the output process even more fun, trying to figure out how to get it then to be a printable object. So you can see it's got my base incorporated in there, and then I've got 3 different height scoops with 3 different angles. So the angles of attack that I've got here, and you can see that they are filleted too to smooth that air going into it. So this is a 10-degree attack, this is a 15-degree attack, and this is a 30-degree attack. So if you look at it from this perspective, straight on, you can see that if we had high scoop in the front, it would also just steal air from the back. So you have to have the different angles of attack on there so that the air coming across can equally divide itself and make its way into each of the individual fans. Then I got to realizing because of the scoop design built into the front of this chassis where it scoops up, the front fan is even less important when it comes to the scoop, although I obviously wasn't gonna remove it, because the air is already being ramped up. And that is just the natural first thing it hits is actually this fan. That's perfectly where it lines up. So I ran this test a couple of different ways. I did a test to see under normal conditions with the side panel open and such, and these fans not really running at full speed. I wanted to know in an open air configuration, what fan speeds does this GPU kind of cap out at? Now this is a 5090, it's a 600 watt card. There's no additional power limit to it. 600 watts, all you get with the 5090 unless you run like a Matrix or a Lightning Z or 20th ROG, whatever. Those cards are like 800 watts to 1000 watts. I digress, that's not what we're testing here. 55% was where my fan speed tend to cap out. And so I wanted to then see if we lock the fans at 55%, what is the effect of both the scoop and changing the speeds of the intake fans on the front. Now, before we get to the results, I want to go ahead and put my card in there without the shroud, and I want to do some smoke testing so you can visualize what I'm talking about when I say that the velocity of the air going across can have an effect on the intake ability of the GPU. And then we'll put the shroud on and do the same visualization. I'll show you the results and then I'll stop wasting your time. But it was a fun project. I've been watching a lot of Mythbusters. I've been watching a lot of Mythbusters lately, and it's really just allowed me to really kind of start thinking in a more I don't know, creative sense, if you will. So that's exactly where this came out of in my head. So, all right, let's do some smoke test. Okay, so this is one of the testing configurations that I had. This is case fans at 100%, GPU at 55%, smoke machine is in there. Don't ask me where to get the smoke machine. You can easily ask Google where to get a smoke machine. You'd probably get it, obviously you'll get a faster response than you will from me. It's just smoke machine. Look up smoke tester. Anyway, so check this out. You'll see some air obviously will make its way through the pass-through fan, but remember, we got air being ramped right to that. But look back here, more importantly, above the smoke machine body back there, you're gonna see the smoke just flowing right past the graphics card. Now, some of the smoke is obviously making its way into the graphics card, but it's not like, I mean, most of it is just bypassing it and going right out the vents in the back. And that was what actually got me thinking to do this test when doing the smoke test in so many other cases. Obviously, it takes a significant amount of airflow to overpower those fans. And that's what it looks like without the shroud. And now I'm gonna put a shroud in it. So I printed it in this ASA black sparkle, which I think goes really well with the card. Phil was saying, even if it doesn't work, I would want it because it looks cool. So it doesn't hurt anything. But yeah, so that's what that looks like. You know, you can see looking straight on how we definitely are able to grab air from all three tiers.
You know what I just noticed? It kind of looks like a stoplight now.
Oh yeah.
It's totally a stoplight.
Oh my God, I didn't mean to do that. Way to make it feel like all I did was steal a design. Now the cool thing is the angle of my scoops, cups, whatever you want to call them on there, kind of matches the upward angle of the scoop in the front of the case. But check this out, it's really obvious now that it's getting caught. So you can see the low pressure zones that I've created, especially in the rear fan. You can see how the smoke hits it and then kind of stops and swirls up into the GPU. And now you have a lot more air actually exiting the heatsink of the GPU. So visually, it appears to be working. The question is, what are the charts gonna say? Okay, so the first one we got here is actually the case fans at 100% with no shroud, and the GPU capped at just under 75 C. It was about 30 or 73.8 C on average. That's not bad. That's not terrible. It's really not. That's performing exactly as it should in most situations. But 50% fan speed on these fans is only 750 RPM. They're very slow, but it's still a lot of air. It'd be more like a regular case fan's front air flow fans, like 120s or 140s versus the 220s, right? But as soon as we moved the case fans up to 100%, so it actually dropped the average GPU temp a little bit over 71 degrees. So it actually dropped about 2.5 to 3 degrees by just upping the 100% fan speeds on the case. Now, some could look at that and just say, see, there you go, case closed. The case fans don't hurt the performance, it actually helps the performance. I think what was happening in this particular case is the higher velocity is just ramping up off that ramp and bouncing off the GPU hard enough to where you have the top half of the fan on this case blowing air straight and the bottom half blowing it up. So you kind of got this bit of a turbulence happening, and that was pretty obvious with the smoke as well. So as it's bouncing off the GPU, the fans are able to grab some of that air and pull it through, but ultimately it's still pushing a lot of the air past it. Because the next test here shows what happens if we put the scoop on and then run the fans on the GPU at 55% and then the case fans at 50%. They're nearly identical. What do I mean by that? With the scoop on and the case fans running at 50%, we're getting the same temperatures on the GPU as we were with the case fans at 100%. So ergo, you can deduce that by just putting the shroud on with the 50% fan speed also got us that same about 3C drop. So it's pretty impressive to see what was able to happen with that. Now you'll notice that the chart here, it took a little longer to start the test. We used Steel Nomad for this because it's a true 600 watt load in the Explorer mode, so we can keep the scene static and keep the load identical across the board. If anyone's ever run any 3D Mark stuff, you can see sometimes it just takes a little bit longer to start. It's because of the way that it is when it scans system info and such. But, so already just by throwing the shroud on, gave us that same drop that increasing the case fan speeds did, which means the shroud is capturing air and pushing it up into the fans exactly as I thought was gonna happen, exactly as the smoke was showing. And the cool thing about that is running these fans at 750 RPM, which is about where 50% RPM was on this. Actually, it's a little bit lower than that for the front. I believe the RPM signal on this setup is actually grabbing the 180 fan in the back because it was showing 1300 RPM max speed, even though the front fans are 1050 RPM. So it was showing 775 RPM on the 180, which means these were probably closer to 550 RPM. So they were silent. They made no noise whatsoever. The only fans I was hearing were the CPU fans and the GPU fans. And to see that level of a drop shows, hey, the shroud was working. But obviously we had to put the case fans at 100% as well. So what happens there is just a slight drop once again. So with the case fans at 100% and the GPU shroud on, we were hovering right around 70C, dropping down to 69, hitting 70.5 and right around there. So almost a 5C drop. It was a lot of work to drop at 5C, but considering the tests are locked down in a very temperature controlled room with very controlled speeds on the fans, shows that there is some validity to my thought that air velocity past the GPU can overpower the GPU fans, but obviously the GPU fans can still do their job and pull air into the cooler. And it seemed like the story was over there. And I went, okay, cool. There's minor improvements to have. This arguably looks cooler than just having it be open. It is cooler slightly. If you actually look at the tail off or the trail off at the end of the chart, you can see too that with the scoops, they actually cool down a little bit faster. I stopped every test as soon as it crossed 35 degrees Celsius on cooldown. So it even cooled down a little bit faster. But these are not anything that's going to extend the life of your GPU. It's not gonna do anything for your GPU lifespan-wise by keeping it cooler. But then I went, well, what's happening with the frequencies? And this is where it became quite interesting. So you're gonna notice what looks very weird on this chart, because in the beginning, the frequency's all over the place because 3D Mark scans system info, which also will ping the GPU for, hey, what's your max clocks and all that sort of stuff. So you can see them kind of all over the place right here. But you'll notice the pink line and the blue line are bouncing around frequency based on the scene that's happening and the load. Both of those are the no shroud GPU benchmark frequencies. The green line and the yellow line, which are much more solid, are both with the shroud. So that made me realize, like, the temperatures at which we're talking here are the difference between hitting some boost bin clock changes based on temperature, also versus the max capability of the boost table for your GPU. So the shroud was able to keep it cool enough and force enough air into it to where we had a much steadier frequency for the GPU. That is where you would notice a difference, not the temperature. By the frequency changes are where you would notice some difference. And the way to get the frequencies to be more steady is to get the GPU colder because of the GPU boost bins. That's why water-cooled GPUs tend to go to their max speeds and just about stay there almost all the time, fluctuating maybe 25C at the most. Here we were fluctuating anywhere from, as you can see, 2650 all the way up to 2850. So that's 200 megahertz swing, which is almost, well, it's what, 0.5% or something like that, because these are nearly 3,000 GPUs, 3,000 megahertz GPUs, they're 2800, 2790, right around there. So not a huge performance difference, but still a difference nonetheless. For the most part, this doesn't matter to anybody. It's not gonna change your gaming performance. It's not gonna make you suddenly be able to run a higher frequency, or excuse me, a higher settings on your games. It's not gonna make or break the lifespan of your GPU. It's not gonna keep your cable from melting. It just was a what happens if. And we learned some stuff today. And we learned that it looks really cool. And I don't think I'm gonna share the STL. I spent a lot of time on this one and I kinda wanna keep it for me. All right guys, thanks for watching. It was a fun learning experience, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's not gonna have any huge real world results. Sound off down below with what other experiments you think I should come up with or try out, Mythbusters style. Basically, the two things I've learned by just really binging Mythbusters as somebody that didn't really watch it when it was on TV very often is every experiment is an opportunity for failure, and anything worth doing is worth overdoing. Those are the two most important things I took away from that show. All right, guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.